What's up, guys? Welcome to Game Crunch. A little bit different video here today regarding World of Warcraft, particularly Season of Discovery. Now, what I have on the screen here is a video from the Comeback Kids, Sky from the Comeback Kids. It's from yesterday. And the reason why I have this video open is on this video, he gathered some good community thoughts on what's working and what isn't working with Season of Discovery. And going over a lot of these community thoughts, I wanted to kind of give my 2 cents and kind of why some of these issues can't be fixed and why some of these issues are the way they are, and what things in this game I feel kind of are really bad game design, bad choices on the developer's end. So what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of let some of his video play, and then I'm going to pause the video and kind of talk about a few things because I think there's some really important things to talk about here. So let's start it off here where he starts talking about the community and what's going on. Let's check this out.
Coming out. So we asked you all in the community what directly from Season of Discovery's features can kind of be a part of this problem as well. Like, what are your favorite aspects of SoD and what are your least favorite aspects of SoD? And I gotta tell you, the answers are kind of alarming here. Now, these are based off of the most common likes and dislikes. Starting off with the most common like that we saw was the new spell additions to the game, as well as the rune system. But something that goes hand in hand with this, with one of the most common dislikes, is the balancing of new runes and abilities, meaning that there are a lot of runes out there that are just simply not good or viable. One thing I can say about Season of Discovery so far is that sadly, what a lot of players do is play the best rune combination out there, and that's really it. I think there are a lot of runes for every single class in the game that are just flat out bad at this point. Ice Lance for mages, Ancestral Guidance for shamans, Inspiration Exemplar for paladin, Shadow Flame for warlock. These are just a very small amount of the runes out there that are bad and no one ever really uses. So the number one most beloved feature in Season of Discovery is the runes and the spell additions, but there are a good quarter of the runes out there that are rarely used. That just seems like a missed opportunity.
Now, there's something with the runes that they can't be balanced. Sorry to tell you this, but you can't balance. Not in this World of Warcraft community that we have. You will never, ever achieve a perfect balance on runes. There's no way to do it. The only thing you can do, and if you get it as close as you can, if you get these runes within, let's say, all four chest slot runes are all within, let's say, 20 DPS of each other. What's going to happen in that case? Well, they're going to take the one that's 5 DPS above number 2. And most players are still going to run with that. Even though they're very, very balanced, most players are still going to run with the most optimal setup. There's not much you can do there. So that's what really got me thinking. And this kind of can go hand in hand with solving a lot of these PvP issues that people are complaining about with getting one shot in PvP. Is I really feel like the runes almost need to be broken down based on not their damage, but almost like you have your damage, you're clear, like this is for raid DPS rune, and then you've got another rune that this is for PvP. For example, you could have a rune for a mage, for example, that doubles the absorption from your ice barrier. Well, it's pretty useless in PvE, but hell yeah, in PvP, that's really going to help stop you from getting one shot. And if you build those runes in that way, instead of trying to make them all even in sort of one aspect, kind of make them for different things. Like you have a rune that's really useful when you're trying to do solo leveling. You have another rune that's really useful in PvP combat, maybe when you're against spellcasters, and then you have another one that's more good for melee DPS. So based on the battleground you're in, oh crap, there's like 6 warriors in this battleground. Okay, I'm going to throw on for a mage or a warlock, for example, I'm going to throw on my rune that increases all the armor from my demonic armor, or ice armor, molten armor, whatever it is. And kind of break the runes down like that, I think is the only way that you're ever going to really achieve any sort of semblance of balance within those runes, because at the end of the day, the community is always going to min-max. They're always parsers. And I mean, Asmongold makes the point all the time that just get rid of the parsing and you'll see a big change. People use a whole bunch of different stuff. And I think that's really the only way at the end of the day you're ever going to really have those runes utilized is by making them clearly useful in different situations. And that's really all you can do. So let's get on to the next point here. Let me know what you think about that down below. If you think it's a good idea, if you think I'm an idiot, dislike the video and carry on with your day. Anyway, let's continue on with what Sky has to say here.
Yeah, I think the developers really need to look
So
into.
the
The
next
second
next
most
point he's
liked
bringing up is
feature
alts here.
commented was playing alternate characters and trying out the abilities and experiencing the class. Once again, a
I
direct
agree.
problem though that
I
goes
really
hand
like
in
making
hand with
alts.
this is the large amount of work it takes to play an alternate character and how much time it takes to acquire runes. Everybody that I've asked about playing an alternate character tells me they want to and they love the idea. They just don't want to do the work that comes with it and doing all the same grinds they previously did on their main character. I think it's important to remember that all of these grinds and work in a normal MMO setting in World of Warcraft is never a problem. It's fun doing that. But I think having all of this in a seasonal format that we could all assume might not be coming around or sticking around forever, it's a pretty damn big turnoff for a lot of people. A lot of the early game runes for Phase 1 and 2 either require multiple players or take you on a long quest chain that people
God,
don't really
yeah.
want to do anymore. I think you should leave it as an option just in case you've never done it, but I also think it would be a really good idea if they
Before he gets into that, this kind of goes in tandem with another community grievance that comes up in about a minute or so in this video that hasn't kind of come up. And I agree, like trying out new alts is one of the most fun things for me. I'm maining a melee hunter, which I kind of want to be a ranged hunter, but melee is just kind of the meta. And here we are in this meta community that just wants to do the most damage all the time. I'm kind of like that too. Whoops. Anyway, and then I have a mage and a rogue and a warrior as well. And trying to maintain all of them is a lot of work. But at the other end of the spectrum, which he kind of brings up later, that he says, oh, well, there's nothing to do in the end game. You know, I just kind of log on, do my raid, log out. So there's kind of like this dynamic that people want. They almost want to have their cake and eat it too. So they want to complain that they have nothing to do, and then they also want to complain when they have too much to do. So what does the community really want at this point? Do you want not enough to do, or do you want too much to do? So there's a few different ways that obviously I think you can fix this. I do agree that when he goes into here, actually, let's watch the next little bit of the video because he does kind of bring up maybe some solutions here. So let's just check this out.
gave us other ways to acquire these runes faster for our alternate characters. Like maybe we can spend 2 wild offerings to get a random rune for any class of your choice, or
Not a bad
maybe
idea.
make multiple runes drop for a class in every dungeon in the game to incentivize grouping and running dungeon content, kind of getting 2 birds with 1 stone there. Players love the idea of, playing alternate characters and trying out the new builds. They just don't love the idea of doing all the work behind it. Another big individual complaint from the player base has by far got to be the lack of raw endgame content. This is something that we've been discussing for a very long time.
So he kind of gets into that in a second, which is kind of what I was talking about. So with the thing with alts, I do believe there's a lot of things that should be shared between your alts, like Flight Pass, for example. I brought this up before, and I mean, if you know me, you play with me, I complain about it all the time, that, the auto run from zone to zone is really not entertaining. And that once you do it once, I mean, give me the flight path. At the end of the day, from a realistic perspective, why doesn't the flight master know where the damn flight paths are? Why do I have to find him to tell him where the flight paths are? That doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? So I should be able to find those flight paths one time, and then all of my alts have those flight paths just to speed things up. And I mean, of course, I have all these crazy ideas like faster mounts and faster ghosts and just getting around the world a little faster, especially if you want me to explore a big open world. Well, give me some way to kind of move around that open world a little easier. And I think I can definitely, spend some more time exploring it. But if I'm moving at, a snail's pace, I'm not really interested in going to the far corners of the Barrens. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my thoughts, is that he kind of gets into it here a little bit. Let's continue this video, and then we'll kind of summarize these kind of 3-ish
Time
points
as
here.
we've been making content on SoD, and I'm really hoping this is something they look to solve heading into the end game level brackets.
Because all these things kind
We're
of
not
go
going to dive too deep into this, but
together.
not too long ago, players were given surveys on potentially adding heroic dungeon type
Pretty
content, which would
cool.
be immediately a very good addition heading into this end game. You know, low barrier to entry content that wouldn't be plagued by parsing culture or like barrier to entry, challenging but also rewarding. You know, maybe you can add some new reputation to provide you with pets, mounts, gear, tabards, as well as potentially, you know, rune rewards for your alternate characters if you progress through this reputation grind, you know, to incentivize your alts. An even better idea would to then have all this reputation linked across all your characters.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. Some of those really boring, crazy grinds, like Ashenvale, for example, trying to get the War Song rep, especially in a seasonal realm like this. They should kind of carry over to the alts. But I think ultimately the solution here is more that, when you're complaining about those logging in to do raid logging, what's happening is that you're going on your main character and you're just logging in to do your raid, and at that point in the game you've already got everything you need from the dungeon, you've already got your incursions done, you've already got everything done, there's nothing left to do. And I know a lot of people kind of like the 7 day logout, but at the same time, on the 3 day lockout, I felt like you then had a lot more to do, a lot more reason to log on those main characters, because then at least every 3-ish days you could run the dungeon again and it gave you more reason to log in. So my main, for example, I pretty much only really log on my main once a week. I just kind of raid log my main. And, having those 3 day lockouts. But I think one major solution in these problems is to kind of spread out. What you do is kind of spread out more of the content. All of your BIS, and I think Asmongold actually brings this up a lot, but all of your BIS should not come from the raid. If all of your BIS comes from the raid, all you're going to do is the raid. Some of your BIS should come from some reputation. Some of your BIS should come from some dungeons. Some of your BIS should come from something that you can do solo. I think that is one major thing that is kind of lacking, is that little bit of solo content just to kind of, relax, do something on your own where you don't have to worry about getting a group and you don't have to worry about like who parses and who doesn't parse. You just go out and you do your thing and trying to make something that's, kind of fun to kind of do on your own is really the solution there. But there's this dynamic which I was kind of alluding to and pointing out here that is kind of a plague of all versions of World of Warcraft and all World of Warcraft players in general, is we really like to complain that there is nothing to do, and then when there's too much to do we complain that there's too much to do. And I really feel like in general the community will never be satisfied whether you give them too much to do or you give them not enough to do. There is no happy medium because there is such a wide range of players, and you're going to have players that have a whole lot of time to play and they're going to run out of things to do, and you're going to have players that don't have a lot of time to play and they're going to feel like there's too much to do. There's really no way that you can fix that, in my opinion. If you have an idea, drop it in the comments. But let's
So
continue
you don't
on
have
here
to
with
do
what
the
Sky
grind
has to
over
say.
and over
I'm actually
again.
just
I
going to
mean,
skip
this is
forward here a
something the
little
players
bit
want to see.
to the
Raw
next
content, fun to do with a few
portion.
of your friends and guildies that give you some really cool
Yeah,
rewards.
fun to do
All the
with your
dungeons in
friends.
SoD, just to fire off a
Okay.
couple more, is one of the most commonly loved features is the addition to professions. We can all agree
Yeah,
that
I mean,
a very big W there.
professions aren't exactly fun. I mean, it's not exciting to gather 200 bolts of cloth and click on the create all button and then walk away for 10 minutes while your character creates 50 of these things. It's not exactly exhilarating, but I do like the addition that they have made professions. What he's kind of getting at here is that they made professions, there's a point to them. They're useful, and I think that was one big misstep in a lot of the dungeons as well. As a lot of the dungeons, the gear is very irrelevant, which plays into that. Oh well, there's nothing to do. Well, because the dungeons don't have anything in them. Like most of those dungeons, like Zul'Farrak and Moradin and Blackrock Depths, a lot of those should have at least for most classes like a BIS item in there, a reason to run it essentially. And that would kind of give you something to do where you don't have to go into Sunken Temple and raid log once a week. But let's continue because there's another good portion,
That they added a
couple
bunch of
things
things to
he
professions,
brings
epic
up here
crafting
based
quest
on the
sites and stuff like
community.
that. That's all really, really cool. And then another, by far, one of the
That's
most
fun.
least liked features in Season of Discovery, without a doubt, is the incursions. It felt like
Yeah.
every other comment under this community tab was crapping on incursions and saying how bad it was. And I agree. We've been saying it for weeks. The player base have been saying it for weeks. Nobody likes incursions. The reward.
I particularly, the only reason I liked Incursions at all was because it made the terrible, and this is just a product of Classic. If you go and you play on the Classic era server, it severely suffers from this problem that there's gaps in levels, usually somewhere in like the mid 30s, and then somewhere again in the mid to late 40s, even in the late 30s. Kind of like there's a lot of gaps where you run out of quests to do. You run out of stuff to do, and the only way to level is to go out in the world and just kill things over and over again, or run the same dungeons over and over again. It's really the only way to level. And Nightmare Incursions, I don't understand where they thought this was a good idea. Like ultimately, the Nightmare Incursions could be a good idea, but making them so that you can run them infinitely, like it's almost like they don't understand who plays their game. If you can run these things infinitely, what the players are going to do is find the most optimal way to run them infinitely. And that's exactly what we did. We found a way that we didn't have to kill anything and we could complete 10 quests in 10 minutes just by running through and picking up all the crap and then doing our little lap and then going and doing it again. And that's not fun. It's stupid. And how you would fix that really is to not make them infinitely spammable. I mean, it would have been a big help if you could have just went into the nightmare incursions once a day, do a daily, and do all 20 of the quests every day. And then that would have helped you level up, get some extra money, and it would have helped you fill in those leveling gaps where, crap, I'm level 42 and I've done all the quests in this zone and all the other quests in that zone are 6 levels above me. What am I going to do? Well, if I do my incursions for the day and then tomorrow I log in and do my incursions, for the most part, completing all 20 incursion quests or 18 of them, whatever, for the most part would get you most of a level, especially if you're doing the kills and you've got a little bit of rest XP. Yeah, it's going to get you most of the way there. So having them infinitely spammable was the stupidest idea ever. And I think they would have completely, all they had to do was make it a daily, and I think that would have solved that entire issue, where people wouldn't have been spamming this crap like crazy. You would have just went in, did your incursion dailies, got a little group, killed all your stuff, got your quest done, made a little bit of gold, filled in those leveling gaps, and then went out into the world and did a bunch of other stuff. So
Rewards aren't
stupid.
really
I'm
worth
sorry,
it. So
Blizzard.
please,
Stupid.
Blizzard, if you're listening to this, do not make incursions a big feature
Do
of
not.
next phase. I wouldn't even be mad if you took away the experience gain so people don't have to go spam that over
All
and
right.
over.
Next point he's
Lastly,
gonna.
for a very, very large portion of
This is a
people
good one.
that don't play anymore, surprisingly, the fact that 20-man raids that made a return this phase, people don't like. I'm not going to lie, I was one of the people who thought 20-man raids were going to be really good for the game and, really helpful for bringing people together, but it actually did the opposite. It pretty much killed a ton of guilds out there. It almost killed mine. Every 5 seconds under my community tab, people are upset. They're complaining about 20-man raids and how it broke up their guild, how it's too hard to get 20 people together. It's
Yeah, so he's pretty much said everything that he needs to say at that point, for the sake of my video at least. Yeah, 20-man raids, um, kind of another misstep here in this phase, and I feel like they made. I feel like in the other two phases, the main missteps were people kind of hated Ashen Vale how it ran at first, that it just became this PvE race, which again, because the community optimizes everything. So they're going to optimize the route where they can avoid each other and get it done as quick as possible. It's the same thing that happens in Alteric Valley. You build a mode like that, it's exactly how they're going to run it. It's never going to run how you want it to run. But 20-man raids. The problem with 20-man raids, and I think a lot of people run into this, is a lot of people's guilds are actually from their retail guilds or their classic guilds. And not all of their guilds, so if they're doing 25-man raids in classic, like my guild, for example, Not all of their guild was interested in playing Season of Discovery, and not all of their guilds stuck around with Season of Discovery. So it became difficult to, you only maybe had half your guild come over, which, around 10, 12 people into Season of Discovery. So it was easy to fill a 10 man, but then you had to recruit to fill a 20 man. Well, who are you recruiting from? The other half guilds that came over. So you've got this thing where guilds almost have to merge in order to complete this 20 man. And the other problem with 20 man, especially Sunken Temple in general, and again, another huge misstep on the Sunken Temple, the fact that it was so overtuned when it first came out, and they had to nerf it and nerf it and nerf it again, just pissed everybody off because everyone was like, you had people on one side that were like, oh, finally a hard dungeon. And you had people on the other side like, oh, it's too hard. And other people being like, well, I kind of wanted to progress through it, and now you've butchered it. But it's still, in my opinion, and I really don't think at this point you can nerf it any further. But it's a little bit too. I don't want to use the word difficult because I don't think it's difficult. It does not have difficult mechanics. But in Season of Discovery, as people say, you've got a lot of dads in there. You know what I mean? That don't really have a lot of time. And I think the bigger the raid gets, and again, this is something because I've watched a bunch of Asmongold as well, and he kind of brings this up a lot. That the bigger a raid gets, the more you have to kind of rely on the other people around you. And I feel like a raid really for especially for this style of game, unless you're going into like a mythic thing, a raid should really be designed like a 20-man raid should be able to be cleared by about 15 people. And this would keep it to a point where everyone else on top of that is kind of bonus. Okay, this might sound really easy, but we're running into a problem that we ran in with Nomer, and it's happening with Sunken Temple, that you get all these parse lords that really care about their parses that are relevant for the next 2 weeks. I don't know why. And they only want to take people that have got parses, and they only want to take the best people, and they want to take the best comp because really at the end of the day with a pug you kind of need to because of the difficulty of it. And I believe that is the way you would fix it. In general raid design, especially with this level of game, the bigger the raid goes, the less people you should actually need to clear that raid. Somewhere probably around 75%. For a 10-man raid, 8 competent players should be able to blast through it. If they get 2 bonus, perfect, makes it a little smoother. 20-man, 15 people should be able to blast through it. If we would get a few extra people, sweet. So what's that going to do for pugging? Well, we could bring in, we could go with our 15, or we can make it a little easier and just grab some people, and if they survive, they survive. Now, on the flip side, what you're going to have with that is because as a community, the WoW players are, we're kind of trash. And we min max everything. Is the next problem you're going to have is that we're going to min max that, just like VOA. VOA is a huge example of that. VOA was so easy that with a 10, 12 people, you could clear with 25 mans, and then people would just optimize the group so that way they didn't have to roll against anyone. So there's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword with that if people know it's that easy, then that's how they're going to do it. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's still better for the overall game if more pickup groups, especially if you want it to be very alt friendly. Like if I try and run Sunken Temple, I've got to run it 4 times. I've got 4 characters. I've got to run it 4 times. And only one of those is with my guild. The other 3, I've got to try and find pugs, man. And it is brutal. Some of these people you get in the pugs, I feel like having those slots in those raids for throwaway players that, I mean, if you get a guy that's doing only 200 DPS, well, okay, well, I mean, it's not like we really needed him to get up to that 500-600 point in order to kill the boss. It's just kind of bonus, made it go a little smoother, and we got out a little faster. And we got to, maybe even play with more friends. Maybe you've got one friend that's just new at the game, or maybe he's just kind of bad, but you still like playing with them. You can kind of slot him in at that point. You know what I mean? So, 20-man raids, I think moving forward are not the play. I really hope they don't stick with the 20-man raids, but that would be kind of my solution there, would be to kind of make them so, 75, 80% of the players, if they're competent, you can go through the dungeon fairly easy. That way, when you've got bonus players, or I mean, if you've got 20 players, they should be able to get through it as well. You know what I mean? 20 pickup group players, then you're going to be okay. So that's pretty much it. Again, huge shout out to Sky and the Comeback Kids. I watch a lot of your content. I really like your news videos. Awesome. And I really wanted to. This is kind of the easiest way for me to really kind of get these points and put them all in a video format. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Let me know what your thoughts on any of this is down below. And if you like this kind of content, I do all kinds of news stuff, fun video game related stuff, retro stuff, World of Warcraft stuff. Been streaming a little bit of Smash Bros lately because not so much anymore, but I was a little bit of a competitive player in Smash before. So if that's your jam, I mean, give me a like, subscribe. Thank you very much. We'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one.